On June the 12th of 2022, a Texas kindergarten teacher was approached by the College Station Police Department after crashing into the back of a Chevy pickup truck. During her initial talks with law enforcement, the woman, only identified as Allison, admitted that she'd been distracted while fixing her hair, claiming she'd done so because the AC in her car was broken. Body cam footage of the woman's interaction with law enforcement was uploaded to the Behind the Mugshot YouTube channel, and it subsequently went viral. After admitting to taking her eyes off the road, Allison also told the interviewing officer that she'd had 2 shots and 1 drink. When asked how drunk she was on a scale from 1 to 10, Allison claimed she was a 5 and replied negatively when asked by the officer if she'd trust herself to operate a bus full of children. After performing a series of sobriety tests, Allison was questioned about a scrape on her knee, but she couldn't account for it. The officer then placed the young woman in handcuffs and arrested her for DWI. Allison's boyfriend subsequently arrived at the scene and the pair were shown dancing and smiling in the footage. At some point, Allison asked for her mugshot to be made into a t-shirt, and at her request, a friend started taking photos of her in handcuffs. The young woman was transported to jail and subsequently shown smiling in her booking photo. As the video went viral, many of the internet users reacting to it criticized Allison's carefree attitude towards driving drunk. Number 7. Nicholas Bradford. On December the 14th of 2019, Australian man Nicholas Bradford, aged 25, was caught trying to climb onto the balcony of a stranger's townhouse on Western Sydney University's Campbelltown campus. Bradford, who identified as male, was clad in a black dress and wearing a blonde wig. Campus security was alerted to the presence of a trespasser, but by the time that the police arrived at the scene, Bradford was gone. Officers tracked the man down and watched from a distance as he brandished a hammer and started striking the ground repeatedly. Cell phone video footage captured by Bradford would show him demanding that he not be touched by the officers, to whom he referred as pigs, accusing them of harassment. Then, as the police moved in to make the arrest, Bradford punched an officer in the face, knocking him to the ground. While being tackled and restrained, the cross-dressing man bit into another officer's thigh hard enough to draw blood, which he then spat at the other cops. The townhouse owner watched the arrest unfold from the balcony, and Bradford was heard threatening, "I never forget a face, especially one that ugly." After being transported to the Campbelltown police station, and while he was taken to a holding cell, Bradford kicked 2 more officers in the groin. As reported by the Daily Telegraph, he kicked and attempted to bite 2 additional officers while in isolation at a hospital. At the time of his rampage, Bradford had no fixed address. A court was later told that he had a history of mental health issues and drug addiction. Bradford claimed he had no recollection of the incident with law enforcement, for which he was ultimately sentenced to 18 months in prison with a non-parole period of 6 months. Number 6. Alice Hemp. After a relationship lasting several months leading up to the summer of 2022, English OnlyFans model Alice Hemp received a breakup call from boyfriend Kieran Prince. 30-year-old Hemp from Adlington near Macclesfield, Cheshire, reportedly begged Prince to take her back, but he initially ignored her. The man ultimately agreed to meet with Hemp on June the 24th after she threatened to self-harm. The pair were in Prince's car and the man asked Hemp to leave after reaffirming that the relationship had ended. In the moments that followed, Hemp, who went by Fast Blonde on OnlyFans, punched, headbutted and struck the man with her elbow. She then chased after Prince, but he was able to flag down a passing police car. The woman was arrested the following day. In a later statement, Prince said that his ex's behavior had left him with a number of anxiety and other personal difficulties that prevented him from forming new relationships. Hemp denied any wrongdoing, but was found guilty of harassment and assault in Warrington Court. She was ordered to complete 150 hours of unpaid work and 10 days of rehabilitation activity with the probation service, in addition to being given a restraining order prohibiting her from contacting Prince for 12 months. Number 5. Zachariah Cook. In July of 2019, several robbery suspects who were chased down by law enforcement in Tulsa, Oklahoma, crashed into a fence in the area of 12th and Fulton. One of the fleeing suspects, reported as being a juvenile, jumped the fence and ended up on the property, at which point he was intercepted by homeowner Zachariah Cook. The latter brandished a pistol and opened fire on the suspected robber, discharging 2 shots, one of which hit its target. Local police arrived at the scene and found the wounded teen in the man's yard. Cook was arrested on a charge of wounding with intent to kill. He claimed that he'd wanted to help the officers after he'd heard the suspects firing on them, an aspect unconfirmed by the police. The state's stand your ground law would have applied had Cook been in imminent danger, but as the man admitted during subsequent interviews, he was more concerned for the officers' lives than his own. Cook was held on a $75,000 bond, with his punishment to be decided by the district attorney. Number 4. Shannon Sapir. 20-year-old Shannon Sapir was arrested for criminal mischief in Stamford, Connecticut, following an incident in which she vandalized 2 cars on August the 7th of 2015. The young woman suspected that a female friend of hers was seeing her ex-boyfriend. She keyed the former's car and tried to carve an insult, but misspelt the intended word as war, missing the H. She also keyed her ex's vehicle and slashed the tires from both his and his alleged lover's cars. Sapir alluded to being the person responsible for the destruction in a message to her ex and was eventually taken into custody. She tweeted about the arrest, writing, "At least the boys were nice enough to buy me dinner in there." After the story started gaining traction online, Sapir tried to hit back at commenters calling her a dumb blonde by stating that she was an English major. Number 3. Maggie LAINE. Shortly after turning 21, model Maggie LAINE was arrested for marijuana possession in Muskogee County, Georgia on March the 17th of 2018. LAINE, who'd walked for the brand during fashion shows in 2016 and 2017, had less than an ounce on her, which counted as a misdemeanor, punishable with a fine of up to $1,000. LAINE, who was represented by industry leader IMG Models, was released on the same day of her arrest. While LAINE's crime was generally regarded as rather harmless, the incident generated attention on the internet, particularly due to the young woman's mugshot. The main idea outlined by online commenters was that even without makeup and in a stressful situation, the blue-eyed blonde model looked stunning. Today's topic was requested by Ramela Kame, Flomanium 6563, and Michelle Usher 2499. If you have any more topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Robert Walls. In the spring of 2019, a Florida man named Robert Bobby Walls was wanted on drug charges by law enforcement in Brevard County. He was part of a wider investigation that involved the release of arrest warrants for over 100 suspects. In early May, officers set up a perimeter around a residence where Walls was known to be staying. At some point, they noticed a man riding a bicycle away from the area. They quickly identified the man as Walls and took him into custody. The police department later revealed that Walls had amateurishly disguised himself in an attempt to cycle past officers at the scene. The man, who was possibly under the influence of drugs at the time, had made no other effort to conceal his identity except for wearing a blonde wig. As reported by deputies, Walls faced several charges that included solicitation to sell controlled substances, conspiracy to possess controlled substances, and unlawful use of a two-way device. The sheriff's office posted about Walls' poor attempt at disguising himself and jokingly stated some rules for would-be lawbreakers. The first was for them not to sell drugs in the first place, followed by don't try to hide from law enforcement if you have a warrant, and above all else, do not wear a hideous wig while trying to run. The post concluded its tongue-in-cheek remarks with, "Come on man, have a little dignity." We have our earlier release on when Mardi Gras goes wrong lined up after number 1 in case you are only just warming up and wanted to watch some more They Will Kill You today. Number 1. Orla Sloan. In June of 2023, a young woman appeared in court and admitted to carrying out a campaign of stalking and harassment against England soccer star Mason Mount, his Chelsea teammate Ben Chilwell, and Scottish international Billy Gilmore. 22-year-old Orla Sloane developed an online alter ego which she called Devil Baby and used it to torment the soccer players. The incident unfolded after she and another model had been invited to a party at Chilwell's home. It was there that she met Mount, and they slept together at the residence before parting ways. The soccer player stopped communicating with Sloane after a few weeks, reportedly realizing that the relationship had no future. Angered by the rejection, she wrote to him and warned, "Beware of the devil, baby Mason," followed by numerous other threats over the months to come. Sloane, who made her money on OnlyFans, used at least 21 phone numbers during her campaign against Mount, Chilwell, and Gilmore. She told the latter, "I will hunt you down," and claimed to have terminated a pregnancy with him in spite of the fact that they'd never slept together. She also made disturbing collages of Mount and Chilwell with other women. Once faced with the legal repercussions of her actions, Sloane apologized profusely for her behavior, which she attributed to getting carried away with her online persona. She reportedly came to mistakenly believe that as Devil Baby she was free to act in whatever manner she wanted without consequences. Sloane noted that the scandal resulted in her losing friends, an employment opportunity on the Greek island of Mykonos, and had negatively impacted her dating life. She was sentenced to 12 weeks in prison, suspended for 18 months, with 30 days of rehabilitation sessions and 200 hours of community service. Number 9. Patrick Murphy. On February the 28th of 2019, Pennsylvania jeweler Patrick Murphy was stabbed to death at the Empress Hotel in the Tremé section of New Orleans. 62-year-old Murphy, who ran a chain of successful stores, had traveled to the city with his wife to take part in Mardi Gras celebrations after having recently attended a jewelry convention in Arizona. His blood-covered body was found by a housekeeper in a room registered to 25-year-old Megan Hall. Video surveillance cameras showed Murphy and Hall arriving at the hotel together at 2:10 a.m. About an hour and a half later, the young woman was seen leaving the hotel room alone and briskly walking out the front door. The authorities later determined that Hall had fatally stabbed Murphy twice in the abdomen and once in the neck. She was arrested and initially charged with second-degree murder, armed robbery, and obstruction of justice. A charge of sexual battery was formally added in March of 2021, but the authorities didn't elaborate on how it pertained to the case. Hall faced a mandatory life sentence for the murder charge and up to 99 years on the other counts, but her trial was repeatedly delayed due to pandemic-related restrictions. As of the latest updates, it was set to commence in the spring of 2022. Hall was featured on the Netflix reality show Jailbirds New Orleans, and during the second episode, she briefly and vaguely touched upon the circumstances of her incarceration. The young woman reported that she'd come to the Mardi Gras carnival from Memphis and had been out drinking with two female friends when a situation occurred. Number 8. CLAYA Jordan Whetstone. On February the 19th of 2022, a student from the University of New Orleans was dropped off unresponsive at a local hospital. Roughly an hour later, 21-year-old CLAYA Jordan Whetstone was pronounced dead, but the cause wasn't immediately clear. Police retraced the young woman's actions on the night through a series of testimonies. Whetstone had traveled to a suburb of Metairie to attend a pre-Mardi Gras carnival parade and had been out drinking with friends. Around midnight, she told one of them that she wanted to go to her apartment in Gentilly and check on her dog. Upon entering her residence, she was joined by her Uber driver, whom she'd reportedly presented as a newly met friend to roommate Reese White. The latter saw that Whetstone was intoxicated and suggested she remain home, but the student insisted that she had to go find her car and headed back out with the Uber driver. Around 1:30 p.m., she was called by her friend, Roberto Torres, who allegedly heard the driver in the background asking Whetstone, "Do you like to party?" The young woman told Torres she would call him back but never did. Hours later, she was dropped off at the hospital by a private vehicle, but the police didn't reveal if it was the Uber driver from the night before. Whetstone's family pressed the authorities for answers, but the most recent updates on the young woman's passing came in late April of 2022. The coroner's office determined she'd had lethal doses of fentanyl and ethanol in her system, classifying her death as accidental. Her family suspected it had been due to a spiked drink. They threatened a lawsuit on the basis that no further information regarding the details of her death, particularly the extent of the Uber driver's involvement, had been offered. No arrests had been made, and the New Orleans Police Department maintained that the case was an active and ongoing investigation. Number 7. Maurice Williams. On Mardi Gras afternoon 2018, Louisiana Tech student Eddie Dingle and his family were watching the parade in the 2400 block of St. Charles Avenue in New Orleans. A fight broke out under unspecified circumstances between a woman who was with Dingle and another female parade goer from a neighboring group. According to information from an arrest warrant, 29-year-old Maurice Williams intervened to break up the fight. Dingle then brandished a gun from his waistband and shot Williams multiple times, killing him. 21-year-old Dingle surrendered to the authorities a few days later and was charged with second-degree murder. His lawyer argued that he'd acted in self-defense after the other group had attacked him and his family. The student had no prior convictions but had been arrested in the past for having a gun on school campus. Dingle was subsequently released on a $100,000 bond as he awaited his day in court. Number 6. Veronica THEURER. During Mardi Gras 2020, a Texas woman was arrested in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, after walking off with a dog she'd allegedly been considering adopting. 55-year-old Veronica THEURER took the canine, a Gila mix named Bonnie, during the Crew of Mutts parade. The dog had been under the supervision of the West Feliciana Animal Humane Society, who subsequently shared the story on Facebook seeking help from the public in locating her. THEURER was arrested the following morning after she'd called 911 to complain that her car was being towed, but Bonnie was no longer with her when she was taken into custody. The dog was found that same morning near the Greyhound bus station in Baton Rouge. It was determined that THEURER had abandoned Bonnie after walking off with her, and she was booked into East Baton Rouge Parish Prison on account of theft of a dog. Number 5. 2020 parade float accidents. Within the span of a week in 2020, 2 people were fatally struck by Mardi Gras floats in separate incidents in New Orleans. On February the 19th, Geraldine Carmouche was run over and killed by a tandem float, a type of display in which a tractor pulls up to 3 or 4 connected elements. Witnesses reported that the 58-year-old was killed during the Mystic Crew of Nix parade as she tried to cross a hitch holding 2 floats together. She tripped, fell underneath the second trailer and was crushed by it. Days later, on February the 22nd, an unnamed man was fatally struck by a tandem float during the Crew of Endymion parade, traditionally the largest parade of the season. As reported by the Times-Picayune, the float was called Captain S.S. Eddy, which had also struck and killed an Endymion rider in 2008. In the aftermath of the latest fatal incidents, New Orleans Police Superintendent Sean Ferguson announced a ban on tandem floats for the remainder of the 2020 carnival season. Number 4. Brandon Bovain. A tourist visiting New Orleans in 2022 was gunned down as he was in the process of checking into a hotel off Chef Mentor Highway. 33-year-old Brandon Bovain, along with his girlfriend and younger brother, had made a spur-of-the-moment decision to attend the Mardi Gras festivities. The trio were about to be handed their room keys but realized that they needed an app on Bovain's girlfriend's phone to complete their payment. Bovain went to retrieve it from their car, but as he searched for the device, people from 2 separate cars in the parking lot opened fire on each other. Bovain, who had no connection to the suspected gang-related conflict at the scene, was caught in the crossfire. The father of one died after being struck in the head by one of the stray bullets. His grieving brother subsequently told a media outlet that nobody expected it to be his last trip, while reaffirming that Bovain had had nothing to do with whatever situation was unfolding in the parking lot. No arrests were made as of the most recent updates, but on March the 4th, investigators revealed they were looking for a newer model white SUV, possibly a Chevrolet Equinox, which had fled the scene in the moments that followed the shooting. Number 3. Peter Dabney and Ivan Williams. On February the 2nd of 2015, as floats traveled along the St. Charles Avenue Mardi Gras parade route, teenager John Hicks gunned down Peter Dabney and Ivan Williams, aged 21 and 22 respectively. Hicks was arrested after a police officer who'd been posted along the parade route chased the 19-year-old down and saw him disposing of his weapon into nearby bushes. The district attorney's office would later praise the officer's actions, maintaining that a case against Hicks would have been unsustainable without the gun. In spite of the incident occurring on a crowded street, none of the potential witnesses were reportedly willing to testify. An arrest warrant indicated that Hicks had confessed to the shooting, stating that he and his group were in a verbal altercation that turned physical with another group. He was ultimately sentenced to 45 years in prison, following a plea deal in which he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of manslaughter. Number 2. Tashanti Tony. On the night of March the 2nd of 2019, after the Endemayan parade, Tashanti Tony lost control of his Chevrolet Camaro and crashed into 9 cyclists on Esplanade Avenue, New Orleans. 32-year-old Tony, whom it would be determined had been intoxicated behind the wheel, sped through the bike lane at up to 80 miles per hour in an ill-fated attempt to pass slower traffic. He then plowed into the cyclists. 2 of them, 27-year-olds Cherie Walls and David Hines, aged 31, were killed, while 7 others sustained various injuries. In the immediate aftermath, Tony abandoned his vehicle and tried to flee, but was caught several blocks away. He was charged with 16 counts that included 2 of vehicular homicide with a blood alcohol concentration above 0.2%. During the ensuing court proceeding, which unfolded over the fall of 2019, he apologized to the victims' families and pleaded guilty as charged to all counts. He essentially threw himself at the mercy of Orleans Parish Criminal District Court Judge Laurie White, who consequently gave him the maximum sentence on every count. As per her decision, Tony would spend 30 years behind bars for each death, terms that would run consecutively to the 30 years and 6 months imprisonment for the 7 people he'd injured and the 6 months for damaging other vehicles. In 2021, an appeals court vacated the 91-year sentence, describing it as the harshest in state history for a vehicular homicide case and arguing that White hadn't sufficiently articulated her reasons for it. Number 1. Peter Latino. On February the 1st of 1970, bad weather had resulted in several Mardi Gras parades being postponed in New Orleans, but the crew of Carrollton members voted to proceed as planned. The weather initially cleared, but then as the parade made its way over the Jefferson Davis Parkway, it began to rain and the wind gradually intensified, reaching close to 70 miles per hour. A small tornado struck the Carrollton float, toppling it, and club president Peter Latino Sr. was thrown from the overpass to the railroad tracks below. The man plummeted 35 feet and ultimately succumbed to his injuries. Within weeks, the city council released an ordinance which made it mandatory for float riders to wear safety belts, while also requiring that future inspections of floats be executed in a stricter manner. Thanks for watching. If you could permanently change the color of one of your physical features, which would it be and why? Let us know in the comments section below.